Hi friends, thank you for taking time out of your week to spend a little with me. I appreciate you. So today we have an older case that I became familiar with when I was working on another case. We're discussing the love pact between Elsie Sweeten and Reverend Lawrence Hight, who ended their marriages by murder as a means of being together. As always, I ask you to join me as we remember Wilford Sweeten and Anna Hight. Marie's son, who went by Elsie, was born on July 15, 1892. She was one of 6 children. Shortly after her birth, her father abandoned the family. By the time she was 2, her mother remarried, and Elsie described growing up as lonely despite her big family. She felt neglected by her parents. By 12, Elsie decided school was not the route she wanted to take in life, so she dropped out and found work as a housemaid. She cleaned houses for several years. This is where she met her future husband, Wilford Sweeten, who went by Jack. Jack was born on June 24, 1883, and was described as a hard worker. Elsie felt Jack could provide for her despite his cold demeanor, so she took the leap, and at 16, the pair married and quickly started a family. Jack and Elsie had 3 sons together, and the Sweetens lived and worked on a farm. Life was okay. Elsie wanted to be a good wife and mother for her family and stuck to her role. But then Jack got an offer to work in the mine in Nason. This was a big step up for the Sweetens since he would make between $40 to $50 a week, which at the time was great money. So Jack took the opportunity. He moved his family over an hour away to the small village of Ina in Illinois. The population of Ina was less than 400 people at the time, and the Sweetens found a little yellow cottage to rent. Elsie was described as an average woman with regular features, but her positive personality made her popular amongst neighbors. Although Jack was a great provider, Elsie felt unsatisfied with her life as a homemaker. She claimed she tried to settle into her domestic roles, but due to her husband's lack of affection and attention, she was unfulfilled. According to Elsie, Jack came home from work, ate meals, and went to sleep. He hardly spoke a word to her, let alone provide a loving gesture. The Sweetens were devout Christians and attended the Methodist Church. Elsie was very involved as it gave her a sense of community and something more beyond her household chores. It was here she met Reverend Lawrence Hight. Lawrence Milton Hight was a circuit rider. The Methodist Church in Ina was just one of the 4 churches he held sermons in. He was born on December 20, 1874 in Grantsburg, Illinois. Growing up, Lawrence raised horses in Johnson County, Illinois, and rode as a jockey until he started his work as a preacher, a position he was very passionate about. On June 24, 1897, Lawrence married Anna Sophia Wyndhurst. Anna was born on August 30, 1880. She became a mother in 1900 to her first daughter, Marie, and later gave birth to 2 more children, another daughter, Mildred, and a son, Robert. Lawrence was well respected by the community, and Anna was said to be a good mother to their 2 younger children. Their eldest daughter was married and no longer living at home. Anna was described as being a fuller woman, and many stated the couple looked rather odd next to each other, so they were often not seen in public together. Much like the Sweetens, the Hights didn't have affection for each other. Lawrence would state he married a cold woman who didn't know how to love a man. Due to the lack of attention, Lawrence started to wander. At first, the subtle winks and nods went unnoticed, but the clandestine lovers became more bold with their obvious attraction towards each other. Because of their tokens of affections, gossip amongst neighbors started. The church was not the type of place where an affair could remain a secret, especially with a congregation so small. Rumors only seemed to fuel the panic between Lawrence and Elsie. They knew in order to carry on with their affair, something had to be done. On July 16, 1924, Jack returned home where he informed his wife he sustained an injury to his arm when some mine timbers collapsed. Jack stayed home the following day, so he and Elsie decided to take a trip to Benton to run some errands. The Sweetens stopped by the drugstore, bought some colas, a dish of vanilla ice cream, and some candy. On the way home, Jack started to feel sick. When they arrived, Elsie also claimed to feel ill, so she went to lay down. Jack drove to Nason to have his arm checked, but his condition progressively got worse. Elsie left the home while Jack was gone to pick up something from the nearby store. When she returned to the cottage, Jack was home but in bed and very sick. He started to vomit, and by the next morning he wasn't on the mend, so Elsie called for Dr. Foster and later Dr. Harper, who determined Jack was suffering from ptomaine poisoning from the ice cream. Ptomaine poisoning was food poisoning by bacteria or bacterial products. Jack's condition worsened day after day, the vomiting increased, and his stomach pain was unbearable. So the family doctor, Dr. Clinton, was called where he administered morphine for his pain. In total, 4 doctors were called in who all determined Jack was suffering from ptomaine poisoning, but oddly he was not recovering despite efforts from all professionals. By July 27th, Jack was considered critical and Elsie was frantic. She called several of the doctors back to the house and the Reverend, fearing the worst was to come. On July 28, 1924, Wilford Jack Sweeten died from his condition. An autopsy was performed where the coroner determined Jack's cause of death was due to cirrhosis of the liver. His memorial service was held at the Methodist Church, where Reverend Hight conducted his ceremony. He spoke highly of Jack and claimed that on his deathbed he saved him, and Jack died a true Christian. He was buried at Kirk Cemetery in Ina. On the morning of the service, neighbors gossiped that Elsie and the Reverend were seen on her porch swing. He appeared to be comforting her, but then they noticed inappropriate touching. Now a widow, Elsie found work as a store clerk where she made a few dollars a week to help take care of her sons. She continued to stay involved in the church. Lawrence was often the speaker at the church functions and camps, so Elsie made a point to attend. Without Jack, Elsie didn't feel like she needed to hold back from Lawrence. During one of these revival camps in September of 1924, the pair expressed their love for each other once alone. He explained to her his wife didn't love him and he didn't love her. Now that she was free, he planned to be free as well. He told Elsie he would get rid of his wife and marry her instead. He couldn't live without her, and she couldn't stay away from him. On September 6, 1924, after returning home from the camp, Lawrence went to the store and bought ham to make sandwiches for dinner. He didn't eat that night, but shortly after consuming, both Anna and the children complained of indigestion. By the following day, Anna was vomiting and had severe stomach pain. By the next week, she made no progress, so the doctor was brought in on Monday, where he diagnosed her with ptomaine poisoning. On Tuesday, she was paralyzed from the neck down, and by the end of the week, she was vomiting blood. Several doctors were brought in where they all agreed she was suffering from the same diagnosis. 6 days after her initial symptoms, Anna Windhurst Hight died on September 12, 1924. She was buried in Miller Cemetery. The news of Anna's death quickly spread throughout Ina. The details of how she died piqued an investigation. The pharmacist claimed that Lawrence purchased a large amount of arsenic. Due to this, the coroner ordered the contents of Anna's stomach to be sent off to Chicago for further testing. Weeks later, the results were in. Anna's sample tested positive for arsenic and determined to be her cause of death. The same day, authorities visited Lawrence with a warrant for his arrest. He was placed in custody and transported to Mount Vernon jail. After his arrest, his home and parsonage was searched where containers of arsenic were discovered. Lawrence was found to have purchased poison on 3 occasions according to local clerks. During initial questioning, Lawrence stated he only kept the arsenic on hand due to a large rat infestation. He kept his composure while being questioned, but after hours of interrogation and being forced to review the evidence against him, Lawrence was finally ready to confess by 3 a.m. When asked about the alleged affair with Elsie, he denied it and stated she was a good Christian woman. He confessed he not only killed Anna, but Jack Sweeten as well. He stated he used the poison to end their suffering from the ptomaine poisoning, and as a man of God, he couldn't bear to watch them slowly wither away. Initially, he stated Elsie had nothing to do with the murders. On September 20th, Jack was exhumed and his organs were also sent to Chicago for testing, where it was determined he also died from arsenic poisoning. He kept up the charade he acted alone until the superintendent of the Methodist Episcopal Church visited him in jail. During this meeting, Lawrence was requested to return his credentials, but also urged to make a full confession for his spiritual benefit. Lawrence entered another confession, but this time fully implicated Elsie Sweeten in the murder plot. His confession read, "Mrs. Elsie Sweeten and I fell in love and intended to get married. We made arrangements to put her husband, Wilford Sweeten, and my wife, Anna, out of our way. She, Elsie, asked me what to get, and I got arsenic. I bought it in Benton on July 22nd. I gave it to Mrs. Sweeten. I never gave her husband any arsenic. I said I did because I didn't want to give her away, and after his death, it was up to me to put my wife away according to our pact. Lawrence claimed he only went as far to murder due to the great love shared between them. He gave her the love she craved. After his confession, Elsie was arrested the same day on September 22nd, shortly after 5 p.m., and was also taken to the Mount Vernon jail. During her questioning, Elsie denied guilt or knowledge of a love pact between her and the Reverend. She claimed she didn't understand why she was a suspect and felt Lawrence was lying to save himself. She explained the two didn't have a secret romance and they never spent time alone. When she was with Lawrence, others were always present. She claimed Lawrence made advances towards her, but she brushed him off every time because she was a married woman. Elsie wouldn't admit any involvement, so the state attorney decided to push the two suspects together to see if they would talk. Elsie was brought into the cell where Lawrence was and left alone for a considerable amount of time, with officers and reporters waiting nearby to eavesdrop on the conversation. Lawrence was heard calling Elsie sweetheart and begging her to admit to the murders so they could be free. He explained if they were honest about what they did, then authorities would ensure their safety from the public, who by this point were forming a mob against the murderers. Lawrence felt he didn't deserve all of the blame since Elsie knew she was guilty of wanting her husband gone. Elsie still wouldn't crack. She offered to care for his children while he was in prison. The conversation came to a close and what was described as kissing sounds were heard. Elsie was quickly removed. While she was taken away, Lawrence professed his undying love to her and told her to make the right choice, as it would free her soul. Around an hour after her meetup with Lawrence, Elsie confessed, "I noticed in April of 1924 that Lawrence had affection for me, and my husband had for some time treated me with a lack of love. About 3 months ago, Reverend Hight suggested he get me some poison to give to my husband, and he would do the same to his wife. At first I was horrified, but I had such confidence in him that it seemed the right thing to do, and we finally agreed. A week or so before my husband was hurt in the mine, Lawrence gave me a paper bag with some poison in it, and told me to give some to Wilford. I gave him his first dose after the trip to Benton. He became very ill but later seemed better, so I gave him more. Every time Hight came to the house during Wilford's illness, he encouraged me to give him more. He grew worse and died on July 28th. I don't know when he poisoned his wife. Until I became infatuated with Mr. Hight, I had always led a blameless life and had been a true wife and mother. Lawrence was like a god to me." Elsie claimed she didn't feel sorry initially when her husband was murdered. She got an insurance payout and found work, but after the dust settled, she realized she made a mistake. Jack had always been good to her during their 16-year marriage. By the end of it, she realized she didn't want to marry Lawrence, and as a preacher, he should not have led her to sin. Following the confession, Elsie was taken to Marion County Jail, while Hight was moved to Washington County Jail to await trial. On October 17, 1924, the couple was arraigned where they both entered pleas of not guilty. Initially, their trial was set for November, but finding an impartial jury was a difficult task. Eventually, 12 individuals were selected, and trial was set for December 9, 1924. Ina was a ghost town. Many of the residents were either scheduled to appear as witnesses or were bystanders. Mothers came out with their children and even packed picnics to await the verdict. Nearly 75 witnesses were ready to go. Lawrence's defense was set around his mental health, where they blamed a head injury as a child and abuse by his father. They changed his plea from not guilty to guilty by reason of insanity. However, after being examined by physicians specialized in psychiatry, he was deemed perfectly sane. Whereas Elsie's defense stated she was lured by Lawrence and wouldn't have committed murders without the mastermind behind the plot. Closing arguments were heard on December 23, 1924. The jurors deliberated until the following morning, where at 8:35, they returned the unanimous verdict of guilty. The couple were sentenced on January 3, 1925. Lawrence was given life in prison with the possibility of parole, and Elsie was given 35 years in prison and would be eligible for parole after 11 years. Lawrence was transported to Menard Prison, while Elsie was taken to Joliet Prison. Despite her guilty verdict, Elsie continued to claim innocence. In 1927, Elsie's lawyer entered a motion asking for a new trial, and on April 20th, the new trial was granted on the grounds that Elsie should have been tried separately from Lawrence during the first trial. Her new trial started on September 13, 1927, where most of the testimony by the prosecution was similar to that used during the first one. Her written confession was thrown out due to being given under duress, due to the fear of mob violence. Elsie claimed she only repeated what Lawrence told her to in order to protect herself. She pled not guilty again, but this time the jury was much more forgiving. They returned a verdict of not guilty, and Elsie was acquitted of her charges. After serving just 2 years of her initial sentence, Elsie was a free woman. Shortly after being released, Elsie moved to Chicago, then California, where she remarried twice before her death on October 31, 1960, at the age of 68. She was buried in Mount Hope Cemetery in San Diego, California. Lawrence was released on parole on March 28, 1952, after serving 27 years of his sentence. He died on May 6, 1959, at the age of 84, in Mount Vernon, Illinois. He was buried in Oakwood Cemetery. Hi friends, if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. As always, I'm interested in hearing your thoughts, so leave them below so we can chat about this case. If you found this to be informative, please consider giving the video a thumbs up to let YouTube know you want more from me. And if you're not subscribed yet, you should, because we would love to have you under the ash tree. Thank you all so much for the support and for the birthday love last week. It was incredible to have all those comments and kind messages, so thank you from the bottom of my heart. I took a few days off, as you may have noticed, but I'm back in full swing now, making you all content I hope you enjoy. I appreciate each and every one of you. You're all the best, and I hope you have an amazing week ahead of you, because you've already made mine. But for now, we have to part ways. So stay safe out there, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, friends.